Welcome back to the NIL Era podcast. My name is Elise Bian.
And I'm Fernando Andrade. As the academic school year is about to kick off and college athletics are about to pick right back up, I think it's a great time to start talking about collectives. So Elise, back to the basic, back to the duo co-host section here. Great run with guests, but right now we're back to being duo co-hosts here. Break it down. What are collectives? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, good to be back just chatting us too. But collectives are organizations or groups formed by either alumni, fans, or boosters of a particular school with really just the purpose of raising money to support the NIL opportunities of student athletes. These collectives pool resources to ensure that athletes at their school receive financial compensation for their NIL rights. It's really just putting money straight into the pockets of student athletes. And each university runs their collective pretty differently. Whether your school has an entire athletic department collective like Cal does with the Legends Collective, or sports specific collective for each kind of program, collectives are pretty complex, but in the end, no matter what, they've become such an integral part of college athletics.
How do collectives operate? And I'd like to point out something you said right now, which is every university runs their collectives differently, but aren't collectives separated from the university or at least from the athletic department? Like how does that operation work?
Definitely separate from athletic departments. It is run in kind of a third party fashion. And something that we've just learned in the college athletics kind of environment right now is that collectives have such a big role in every stage of college athletics. In the recruiting aspect of what can a PSA or again prospective student athlete get out of this program's collective, in the transfer portal, who will offer this recruit the most money to come to this university, and in the retention aspect of who is going to offer me the most money to stay here long term. And it's funny because up until NIL, collectives were the compliance office's like worst nightmare. So like you said, in that terms of how do they operate, where do they sit, before NIL, the compliance office had to shut down a lot of these kind of booster clubs that are really just collectives. They would try to shut down any sort of collectives that would form. But now collectives are helping shape the student athletes that come into your program. But in terms of kind of how they operate, collectives raise funds primarily through donations from alumni, fans, and businesses. These contributions can range from small donations to large multi-million dollar gifts. They then identify potential NIL opportunities for student athletes. So these are the brand deals, social media promotions, appearances, and even community service projects that you probably see being posted on Instagram or things like that. And these collectives often work with businesses, brands, and community organizations to then create these opportunities. And what's so great about collectives is they usually help negotiate deals for the student athlete while making sure everything is compliant to stay eligible. And finally, once that NIL deal is agreed upon with the student athlete and the collective and the business, whoever that partner may be, the collective then manages the distribution of payments to student athletes. So this might be done through direct payments or via third-party platforms like influencer, sorry, that specialize in those NIL transactions.
I'm curious as to what the specific relationship between collectives and athletic departments really is, because to my understanding, athletic departments technically just want to stay away from collectives, at least on paper, right? Which is a whole other topic. So let's actually dive into that. What is the relationship, and then we can talk about what the reality may be looking like for some schools making headlines.
I think you're so right in the sense that athletic departments, like at first, were like, okay, we can't touch this. We're not a part of it whatsoever. And I think currently and what's happening right now is the best collectives are the ones that work closely with the athletic department. And although the collectives are not officially part of a school's athletic department, they're so closely aligned with the school's interest and should and often work in coordination with an athletic department to really ensure that there's compliance with NCAA rules and regulations. I think collectives are usually run by third parties and are independent from athletic departments. And while institutions can't directly control or dictate the activities of a collective, athletic departments are allowed to engage in those strategic discussions with collective leaders to align on those general objectives, such as like the types of opportunities that would most benefit for their student athletes. And like I said before, I think right now, having a strong relationship and partnership with your collective from an athletic department standpoint is just ideal for success. You're going to be able to recruit and retain your student athletes at such a higher level.
I think the complicated part here, and this has a lot to do with NIL, is how many different statewide laws there are because some states do allow for this, others don't. And I think it's an important pause to make here to identify the two different types of NIL. The first type of NIL is what we all know and love, which is name, image, and likeness. And I think from our episode with Grant House, he makes a great point, which is anybody should be able to monetize off of their talents. So if you're a college student and you're on TikTok and you go viral, you should be able to get a brand deal, whether you're an athlete or not. Prior to NIL, anybody could be able to get these deals. I mean, sorry, not anybody, just students, right? Post NIL, now athletes can do that as well, which was really unfair. I think that side of NIL is great. The other side to NIL is pay for play, which is kind of what these collectives look like, right? It's let me pay you so that you come to the school. Let me pay you for being on the team. Let me pay you because you're a great athlete and I want you to transfer into my team so that my team wins. And that tends to come from donors, which are pretty much alumni, fans that just have the money to do it because they care enough about the teams, right? The whole thing there, though, is when they start working closely with some athletic departments. And I'll give you a quick story from somebody, a source I talked to that is out of California. They're outside of the state. And this is important, again, because every single state has different laws. But this student athlete on football said that he got recruited through a collective, and that collective worked closely with the recruiting coordinator for the team. And that was really interesting to me. I know there's plenty of headlines. Earlier this year, the New York Times did a piece on the Texas Longhorns and their entire collective. But seeing how closely some of these collectives are to their athletic departments is pretty scary because even like, let's take our own example, Cal Legends. There's nothing that says UC Berkeley on it. There's no school logos. Like, you can't do that. Technically, you could get sued. Obviously, they're not going to, like any school. But then you look at somebody like USC's collective. All the logos are there. There's no hiding it. And obviously, like you see some of the athletes they get, and it's a great school, but obviously they have a great collective as well. Like it's there is no trying to hide it. With all of that being said, I think it's important to note that until we have an even playing field, this will continue to happen, and it will affect the integrity of sports. Because if every single state has different rules, and we're playing two different NIL games of name, image, and likeness and pay for play, if we can't really determine to bring it back the relationship between an athletic department and a collective, like realistically, what are we doing here? I think that's where it starts looking like a super league that Jim was talking about in our prior episode.
I think it's you make some great points there. I think it's interesting of whether you want it to be an even playing field. Like just in terms of Cal's collective and again these like sport specific collectives, that's how you differentiate yourself from other programs. If your, let's say, athletic department wide collective is doing great, okay, how do you get even more niche? How do you support a specific program that you're trying to grow in terms of success and even recruits? You start getting in your donors, getting in your alumni to make a sport specific program and collective, sorry, of getting these people who want to fund your gymnastics program, for example. You put in money that just go to the gymnastics student athletes. And I think that's how you stay competitive. I do agree that maybe there should be uniform state laws for NIL to even the playing field that way. But in terms of the funding for collectives and whether or not you have the right to wear the California script when you do your NIL deals, that comes from a competitive advantage. Does your collective own the rights? Are they paying for the licensing fee for you to represent your institution and film in your gym, in your weight room, things like that? Because Cal student athletes are not allowed to do that. The collective or whoever is licensing our logos, our California script, things like that. They have to go through Learfield. They have to pay whatever amount of money to do that. And if a brand or your collective is not willing to pay that, then you're losing a lot of NIL potential. So it's kind of doing a pros and cons of, is it worth it? Is it worth paying however much money to get that licensing to help your student athletes grow their brand? Or are you relying enough that just you, yourself, and I, with no branding, no matter what you're wearing, where you are, you have enough NIL pull to get brands to come in and help you out and to build that relationship. So it's interesting to see who and what athletic departments collectives are the big ones and how that relationship is to either program success or the future recruits, the future success that these programs are looking towards.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting point that you bring up there is doing like sports specific collectives. I think a great example of how that would work is a sport like men's gymnastics right now. Like that would benefit so much for the entire sport. I know we're seeing this in soccer as well now, of like trying to endow programs, etc. We've seen that at Cal, we've seen that with baseball, we've seen that with rugby, we've seen that with swim and the aquatics programs. But that is still a relationship between donors and the athletic department. Collectives are starting to approach student athletes, which is defeating the entire idea of amateurism, which is the entire debate we've had on this podcast, obviously. With that wall just breaking, right? Now there's a relationship directly with the student athlete, whereas prior it went through the athletic department. With that whole relationship and operation, why are collectives so important, and why do they just play this humongous role right now?
I think there are a lot of reasons as to why collectives are important, but I think one of the biggest reasons is because it's the easiest way for student athletes to get paid. Having a centralized location and a marketplace for a specific student athlete pool to attain those NIL deals really just eliminates the headaches for a lot of student athletes. Just from my own experience and my own teammates, we have so many marketable gymnasts on our team, but with school, season, extracurriculars, adding NIL on top of that is just a lot on your plate. And I think that's a big reason why people get agents, managers, things like that. But a strong collective just allows for a lot of the hassle of you reaching out to brands or searching for deals to be done by the collective. And the collective will then have a whole database of companies who want to work specifically with you, your program, or Cal student athlete or institutional student athlete in general. And I think a strong collective is one that engages the community with the collective. It's really relying on your community and the local businesses in your surrounding area. That's a big reason why everyone loves college sports, is because you have a tie to what is being seen on TV. When you are at a Michigan-Ohio State football game and you're a diehard Michigan fan, that rivalry, like you're a part of it. You went to that school, you lived, you breathed the Michigan Go Blue entirety, and you just have such a stronger alliance. And that's where NIL can really pull you in, of supporting those student athletes that you root for every single weekend. And just looking at, let's say, Arkansas and Alabama, for example, who don't have any pro sports teams in those states. The community and surrounding area in Arkansas and Bama pour so much into their college sports programs. Both those NIL collectives are able to reach out to local businesses who can utilize those promos from their elite student athletes while also pouring money into those specific programs. It just creates and fosters a stronger support and, in the end, competitive advantage to have a strong collective.
Do you think like that's the reality though? Because again, I think that all sounds like beautiful and it does make a lot of sense. Everybody wins. The diehard fan in Alabama definitely wins. Their small business will profit off of it. The student athlete profits off of it. Everybody's happy. But then who's really getting the money? How much money are we talking about here? Like, I just don't think it's spread out at all. I think it's the top guy making millions of dollars and then everybody else being left behind. Obviously, there's like the micro deals, but like realistically, how many, like, we see all these headlines. We see Caleb Williams, we see the Livy Dunns, we see the Caitlin Clarks, but there's so many student athletes. And obviously, don't get me wrong, they work their ass off as athletes and as creators as well, like to even put themselves in these positions. So they do deserve it. I'm not saying they don't, but when it comes to the athletes that are primarily athletes, like not even on the creator side, right? And this is geared toward more like football. I think collectives are really just pay to play. Like it's masquerading for pay to play. It's masquerading for pro sports. Don't you think that's what we're seeing in most of the cases?
Yes and no. I think like the Caitlin Clarks, the Caleb Williams, honestly, I don't think they're getting their NIL deals through collectives. I think those are like something else. But in terms of just even if you're looking at Olympic sport athletes, let's take men's soccer because I've seen plenty of your teammates do NIL deals. I can almost guarantee you that a lot of those are coming through the collective. I think the collective, especially for Olympic sports athletes, are such an easy way to get a deal. If everyone in there wants to work specifically with a Cal student athlete. If you're in the Legends Collective, you want to work with a Cal student athlete. So the pool of people is just so much smaller, and it's now who's going to want to do that deal. Are you willing to spend X amount of time for a $30 deal? It's not going to be thousands of dollars unless you have the followers, unless you are that niche they're looking for. But I think collectives are a good way to make the quick $50, the quick $60, like things like that. It's like kind of the pocket cash. But if you're doing no NIL deals and no one's representing you, like $50 isn't that bad for like a story post, two story posts. Like it's kind of just weighing your options. In terms of the recruiting, I think I think where I'm like drawing the line is the tampering in the portal. That's where I'm like, that needs to stop of poaching from other teams, and like whether or not it is donors or a collective that reach out to a student athlete at another school and was like, jump in the portal and we'll give you this much. Like that I don't think is great. If you're already in the portal and people are coming to you like that, like, well, that is just you being recruited. Like honestly, that's because like even for a PSA, like you go into these calls with the coaches now, and yeah, you're gonna ask, how's the balance between athletics and sports? What are the resources you get as a student athlete? And then it's how many student athletes, how many girls on your team are participating in NIL? What resources do you have to support NIL? Do you have a collective that backs you? Those are now the questions that coaches are getting in these recruiting calls, these recruiting visits. It's not anything really different that's happening in terms of the portal of being recruited, in terms of like, this is the resources we have for NIL. It's for me, I'm drawing the line of the tampering in the portal. I don't think that should be happening. Poaching shouldn't be happening, but also like the empty promises, I don't think should be happening. I don't know how many empty promises are actually happening. We're being told that they do happen, but I don't I don't know how true that is. I don't know how many happen, but I think you're right of collectives are pay for play, and I think that's been college athletics for a while. Like I don't think that's anything too different, and I think it's only going to become more transparently pay for play.
With all of that being said, how do you see collectives operating in the near future?
That's a great question. Obviously, there's still so much unknown for what's next for college athletics. I think the NCAA was anticipating that collectives would go away after the House settlement, but as of now, it doesn't really look like they'll be eliminated. In just my opinion, I can see collectives partnering more with sports agencies to try and attain more lucrative deals and I guess like the flashier deals for their student athletes. For sure, I can see a greater collaboration between athletic departments and collectives, still being run by a third party, but I think we can anticipate just that shared initiative between collectives and athletic administration, especially with the House settlement terms of athletic departments potentially owning the NIL rights of their student athletes if agreed upon. Having a strong relationship with your collective is going to be crucial in keeping your student athletes.
With all that being said, just to help me understand and our audience understand as well, like let's make out a list. What are the pros and cons of collectives in the NCAA today?
I think starting with the pros, start on the high. First and foremost, it's just student athletes are getting financial support and financial gain. Collectives bring such a significant amount of income to student athletes through NIL deals that can support not only themselves, but their families as well. I think another pro is that community and alumni engagement. Having a collective allows a space to strengthen that connection and network for both student athletes and professionals in this field. And I think that also will help the relationship of just coaches and their student athletes. If you have successful alumni, you're going to want to maintain that relationship. And that starts from when you're a freshman all the way until when you graduate. You want to create an environment that your alumni want to come back, they want to support and see the incoming freshmen and just create that long lasting alumni engagement. And I think the final pro here is just diversity in opportunities. Oftentimes, like we even talked about, it's assumed that only the revenue making sports can get NIL deals because they're the ones being approached in the DMs, the emails by agents, things like that. But with a collective, I think it allows for all student athletes, no matter what sport you play, to have the opportunity to engage in NIL deals. Now, moving into kind of the cons of, I think, collectives, I can see one of the biggest cons is the inequity and disparity among schools. Like we talked about, that competitive advantage for the big name programs who have a strong collective can really dictate the game and who they recruit, especially like we're talking about athletes out of the portal. And I think it all goes back to that student athlete identity. I think the biggest con also is the potential impact on education. The focus on NIL opportunities, because no matter what anyone says, participating in NIL deals takes a lot of time and a lot of work. And it might distract you from your other obligations like school, like those clubs that you're in, things like that. It's, I think everyone thinks NIL deals are one size fits all. It's not. Some people don't want to participate in NIL deals. They're doing other things and that's fine. That's great. But to assume that an NIL deal is just an Instagram post with you and the product, that's just not what the reality is these days. You put time and effort into either creating a script or you have to be wearing a certain thing, being somewhere with this product. It's a lot of work that people I don't think see. And lastly, there is that concern and con over, especially from the NCAA, over that NIL transparency and that quote unquote true NIL. And we've kind of already talked about this, but what I mean by this is, are you working to be paid whatever so amount by your collective, or are you just being handed the sum of cash and no exchange of work? So that true NIL and the NCAA is trying to achieve is being threatened by what seems to be pay for play from the collective.
I think that's what I was trying to get to with the two types of NIL, because there is the NIL of using your name, image, and likeness, which you've worked to build up, and you do the extra work to then benefit off of that, right? But then when it's pay for play, obviously it's not that you're not doing anything for that money, but you're doing the same as everybody else. And pay for play, that's where I have an issue personally. Again, I know we're headed towards that, but until we're there, it's just gonna create a whole mess. Like, to me, it was better either before it was even allowed, or it'll be better after, once it's allowed. But once we're in that gray space, it just sucks. It sucks because some states allow for it, other states don't. Some schools do allow it, others don't. And it's like, well, what are we doing here? Like, that's not the competitive college spirit that we're talking about. Because when the day comes that two rivals face each other and one school allows for it but the other doesn't, like, let's, in the craziest of hypotheticals, again, emphasis on hypothetical, but let's say two schools that are rivals in different states. You take a Michigan and you take an Ohio State. If for some reason one state allows for it and the other doesn't, what is that going to do to the rivalry? Like, what happens there? What happens to the spirit of sports, to the spirit of college athletics? It ends. With that being said, I think there are huge benefits to collectives. I think a great topic that wasn't touched is the potential for for student athletes to have more than 9.9 scholarships on their team, because collectives could be covering these scholarships through, of course, through some work and stuff like that. But even if it were quote unquote pay for play, it's just adding extra scholarships in a different form.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is very important, right? Because you're still prioritizing athletics and competition and education. But when you're pulling away from education and focusing on pro sports, I think that's the gray area that I'm not too sure about. But that's my take. I think before it existed, it was great, and after, once it's fully allowed, it'll be even better. Right now, I'm just not too comfortable. But what are your thoughts, just to close out?
I think, well, first, it's like pay for play isn't allowed. Like, it's not, but it is happening. So it's like, if everyone else is doing it, do you do it?
That's the
Yeah.
gray area I'm talking
Which,
about.
yes,
Yeah.
everyone is doing it. Like, the top programs are doing it. And I think it's how you kind of look at it, if I'm being honest. I think if you have a strong collective and you're grabbing people out of the portal, but let's say you reach your scholarship cap, this is how you get great players, is through your collective. You fund them enough where it covers a scholarship. So maybe they're a walk-on, but through their collective, you're kind of on a scholarship. I think that's where it's like that could be seen pay for play, but it's like, well, the NCAA capped our scholarship limit. We have money to give you. So I think it's kind of how you look at it.
I think that's great. I think that would be fantastic. It's just not the reality. But if it were, it would be amazing.
It's definitely like an interesting concept, and I think collectives just add that additional complication to the college athletic system. And I do understand where the NCAA and others may feel towards this concept of true NIL, but I think personally, I'm still at a place where I think collectives offer so much more opportunity than it does in harming the environment. I think collectives are here to stay, and I think we need more of them, if I'm being honest. I don't understand why some of the top Olympic sports programs at these universities don't have collectives that back them up, sport specific collectives that back them up. There is still so much untapped potential there for other sports and these businesses. You are so much stronger as a unified program and a unified team in terms of your marketing. Yes, you have those 1, 2 standout student athletes who are amazing at NIL and they have a following, all that stuff. But as a program, you can reach so much of a bigger audience. And by having a collective or maybe even a sports agent that represents an entire program, I think is something that can still be done in this college athletic system. And now with the coming future of revenue share, I think I'm excited to see how closely athletic departments and collectives operate. If your university department does not have a competitive collective, you will fall further behind. you need the support and you need it quickly because revenue share is upon us and planning needs to happen now. Like this house settlement revenue share, it's going to roll out before we even know it. And whether you're collective partners with your Learfield or Playfly general managers on your campus, um, there's just a lot that needs to be done. I think like creating a subscription or membership benefit if you donate to the collective can get more people to come. Just like student athlete development, your fundraising kind of department, they host tailgates, and the way you get into the tailgate, you're a member and you pay an annual fee, monthly fee to be part of that, and you get those special benefits as a fan. You can do that same thing for your collective of how to get more money into this and more buy-in to your student athletes getting cash directly in their pockets, because there's a lot to be done and it must be done to not be left behind.
I think that that's pretty much it for this episode. We'll leave it there because that was a good amount of thoughts, and I think we will have to revisit this one for sure, especially with the school year kicking off. It's right around the corner, or may have just started for plenty of schools. So, yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming up now with the football season, especially about to start. I'm sure NIL news will be all over the place. So exciting times for sure. I'm sure we will be revisiting this exact same topic. But yeah, that's it for today. Episode 9, I believe. Pretty exciting. We're getting close to 10, and we're back here. So plenty of more guests coming on. Exciting times as well. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. At least do you have anything else?
No, I think you made a great point there of this will definitely not be our last time talking about collectives. I think these collectives are only going to get more interesting to talk about. So definitely stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, for everybody that watched on YouTube or listened on Spotify, thank you guys so much. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, please follow the podcast. That is it for today, and we will see you all next Monday.
Bye.